He is the clubhouse leader in delegates. He is coming off an impressive sweep of states Tuesday night, and he calls himself the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party. But is Donald Trump still overconfident for what looms in Cleveland? This as the GOP frontrunner makes what some consider yet another gaffe in trying to garner the all-important female vote. And Hillary Clinton fires back with an interesting olive branch for Republicans to consider her as a better choice. The choice would seem to be simple. You either agree or disagree that the world is getting warmer and it's not good for human beings. The new documentary, however, begs to differ. It's that simple a choice. Johnny Football made his choices and he could be heading to jail. And in telling it like it is, I'll detail why no one should shed a tear for Mr. Manziel. And let's dig into one simple question. What is so bad about a contested Republican convention? That's in today's lightning round, where it's your phone calls, you and me, one-on-one, mano-y-mano, or womano, if you will, coming up later in the program. So buckle up. I'm Ed Berliner. This is The Hardline for Wednesday, April 27th, 2016.
After a great deal of consideration and prayer, I have come to the conclusion that if I am nominated to be President of the United States, that I will run on a ticket with my vice presidential nominee, Carly Fiorina.
There is no sport in the world that changes, recreates, dices, slices, and mixes with standard operating procedure better than politics. Where Donald Trump has the numbers making him the current leader of the Republican Party race to the White House, but has not locked up anything despite what he and his supporters will say. Where the man who hopes to be your fearless leader refuses to surrender despite those who tell him it's hopeless, doing so with such flair as to introduce to the American folks the person he believes will be the next vice president. And where something as simple as a speech brings with it praise and derision. Praise for taking on one of the most difficult issues a president can face, derision for doing it with a teleprompter after making fun of anybody who uses such a device. Just like me. Where once there stood pomp and circumstance, there now stands figurative pistols and shotguns at dawn. Let's make sense of it all. Buckley Fellow with the National Review. He is Ian Tuttle. Political reporter for The Hill. He is Jesse Byrnes. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Let's get right to it. Jesse, going to come to you first on this one. Ted Cruz says that Carly Fiorina is the next vice president of the United States. Well, look, there's some people saying, not a bad idea. You put a woman on the ticket, it's a grand idea. Other people saying it couldn't be dumber because you're far behind. And also, nobody likes this woman. All right, I'll give you a shot to go ahead and give us some facts.
Well, yeah, a lot of people would look at this and say, what does Cruz have to lose by doing this? Obviously, he's not the nominee at this point, and so he's announcing this months before it would traditionally be announced. And he's trying to steal the spotlight back from Trump. Trump last night won decisively every county in all 5 states that held contests in the Northwest. And this kind of gambit by Cruz is trying to get some type of momentum for Cruz's campaign in the all-important ahead of the all-important primary next Tuesday in Indiana. So this certainly gives him some spark of momentum and interest, at least in his campaign ahead of Indiana, but also gives him a hugely popular among some Republican circles surrogate with Fiorina. That being said, yeah, it's an easy move by Trump just to kind of label as maybe some type of desperate last-minute move on the part of Cruz.
Ian, isn't it the best thing to say? The man has nothing to lose. Why not? You got a chance, make a splash. That's what Donald Trump does. That's what other people do when it comes down to politics. What do you got to lose? Nothing.
Well, yeah, there's that. It's helpful in Indiana where Cruz seems to be flagging a bit with women. And it's also helpful in California. Look, this is a woman who ran a statewide campaign, unsuccessful, but a statewide campaign in California just a few years ago. She's well known in the state, fairly well regarded. California's demographics are so varied that if, assuming that Cruz does win next week in Indiana, this race goes to California where the demographics are so varied that you effectively have 50-plus micro primaries. That's a great opportunity for Carly Fiorina, a familiar face, to be beating the drum on Cruz's behalf for several weeks before Donald Trump even gets there. So, as an electoral strategy, this might be shrewd on Cruz's part. in the longer term, we'll just have to see, depending on what happens in California, in Indiana and California, and potentially at a convention.
Fair to say, though, I'm already hearing people go, oh, you know, like Carly Fiorina, she messed up Hewlett-Packard. I'm going to go ahead and take a shot on that one here, Ian, because quite frankly, she came into a company that it was in a lot of trouble to begin with, and I'm not a Carly Fiorina fan here by any stretch, but she had to clean up the mess that somebody else left behind. She didn't do a job that everybody believes in, I get it, but at the same breath, she took on a pretty good job. She really took care of Donald Trump in one of the debates. She showed that she's got staying power, and that's what you need because this is a down and dirty campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as her tenure at Hewlett-Packard goes, look, if you look at outside of the window that most people evaluate her tenure by, you see that the company actually moved upward in terms of gains and that sort of thing over the long term. So she did a much better job than a lot of people claimed back when she was running. But you look, you're quite right. This is a good, as far as potential picks go, this is probably as good a job as Cruz could have done at this juncture, and we'll just have to see how it plays out over the next couple of weeks.
All right, let's talk about the other side of this whole coin here. Donald Trump, he gave a speech on foreign policy today, sounding as though more secrecy is needed when using our military. Here's what he said.
We must, as a nation, be more unpredictable. We are totally predictable. We tell everything. We're sending troops, we tell them. We're sending something else, we have a news conference. We have to be unpredictable. And we have to be unpredictable starting now.
Ian, there's a lot of people out there who look at this speech today and they say, absolutely, he got it right. Shake up the foreign policy, no more nation building. Others say that he came off being rather naive and he basically promised the same thing that almost everybody else has so far. Where again does the fact lie?
Well, I mean, it was a speech just riddled with contradictions. You know, one sentence he says he's against humanitarian interventionism, and the next sentence he says we're not doing enough to stop the genocide of Christians in ISIS. One sentence he says, we're doing too much for NATO. The next sentence he says NATO, we're not doing enough for NATO. NATO's a very important ally in our various ventures abroad. I mean, it was a speech that was not unpredictable. It was entirely predictable in its contradiction riddled quality.
Well, part of it too unpredictable because he's got a teleprompter sitting in front of him, which is quite frankly something he doesn't like. Jesse, Let me get to you on this one too, because it's what is necessary. He's got to talk about it. But did he make enough of a dent to make the people who practice foreign policy believe that he understands what he's doing and he has a good grasp of the policies?
Probably not, just from the outset, just because the speech itself lacked any kind of real meat to it, and there were a couple kind of gaps or contradictions, as we alluded to there. But definitely, there's been some kind of internal struggle the last several days within the Trump campaign over whether Trump is going to go in the direction of being more presidential or in this kind of off-the-cuff style that he has seen a lot of success with.
Well, now there's a good point there, Jesse, because Donald Trump has said, well, look, I don't have to be any more presidential. Even he has basically said that whole idea about him becoming more presidential, he's not going to follow it. Isn't it fair to say, though, what's got him to where he is today is this flippant, off-the-cuff attitude? Why change?
Right, and it definitely aids the kind of style that he goes at as far as attacking his opponents, throwing out those kind of sound bites that get a lot of free publicity for him, and looking ahead to a general election, for instance, which is much more expensive than the primaries. That he's going to have to rely on that a lot, just because a lot of Republican donors, based on reports, are not going to support him because he's so controversial. So, but that being said, I mean, this you can tell this kind of more toned down speech that he gave today is only the second time he's used a teleprompter. I believe during his whole campaign, he used one last month during his speech to AIPAC, and this definitely it kind of hinders him to some extent, and that kind of comes across. That being said, he realizes to some extent he has to give those types of speeches, but whether he actually seals the deal and shows a lot of experts in D.C. or a lot of people looking at foreign policy, looking for more meat on the bones, it would be kind of hard-pressed to see that speech today actually came through and fulfilled that.
I got about 2 minutes left. Ian, let me come to you first. Your half of this. When is it time for the Republican Party to solidify behind Donald Trump? in order to defeat the Democrats?
I'm not sure that it's ever going to happen, and to a number of people, the so-called Never Trump folks, their position is that it shouldn't, and that's not necessarily on them. It's on Donald Trump. Why is it the case that conservatives have to make these massive concessions to a man who is, by any reasonable definition of conservatism, not one of them? Why should they simply concede to suggest that he should be their representative versus someone else? I think a lot of this, this is all on Donald Trump over the, if he is the nominee over the next several months, to show why he deserves the votes of a lot of people who he's burned over the past almost year.
Jesse, I got about 30 seconds left, and that's a good point. Isn't it fair to say that it's Donald Trump that has to go to the people and convince them, not the people that have to be convinced and go to Donald Trump? His responsibility.
Yeah, and we're potentially seeing some signs that he's actually kind of breaking through and expanding at least his support base. If you look at just the primaries on Tuesday, getting over 50% in those. Previously in New York, it was the only state, his home state, where he got more than 50%. So there's been a lot of speculation. Can he actually get the majority of Republicans to back him? Maybe it was a geographic flat, but we'll see. Indiana is really key on Tuesday for Cruz to deny delegates.
He's the guy that's got to convince everybody, and you're right about Indiana. Ian Tuttle, Jesse Byrnes, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again real soon. We'll talk to you real soon, as a matter of fact, because still to come in this hour, and it's coming up soon, the lightning round. I got a simple question for everybody. You get to answer it. What's so bad about a contested convention? I'll make a couple of points on this. I dare you to take them on. 877 Newsmax. 877 Newsmax. We continue.